Hey everyone, Mr. Linsky. I'm really excited to read Chapter 16 of Summer, according to Humphrey. I hope you have been enjoying the book as much as I have. There's been some fun things, some mysteries that we've had to figure out, so I'm really excited to find out what happens next. Chapter 16, On Stage at the Comedy Club. Despite the disturbing signs, my day out had done me a world of good, and I was planning on a long, dozy evening in somebody's cabin. But I had forgotten one thing. It was Happy Hollow Comedy Club night, and as much as I would have liked a nap, I knew I wouldn't get one. After dinner, Aldo brought Og and me into the dining hall and gave us a ringside seat near the stage. It looked a lot bigger than it ever had before. I was concentrating on remembering my part when Hap Holloway came out on stage with a very serious look on his face. "Before we start, we need to do a little talking," he said. "There were some signs that went up today about freeing our animals. First off, if you want to talk about a problem, just come to me. No need to put up signs anonymously." Anonymous was the funny name people called themselves when they didn't want to give out their real names. "It's a good issue to discuss," he said, "so let me say this. We're hoping to release Lovey, but only when she's completely healed. Jake has been our camp mascot for a while, but I'd be happy to see how you all feel about releasing him." I gulped hard. It sounded like Hap Holloway was in favor of letting us all go wild. My whiskers twitched as I listened intently. As for Og and Humphrey, they are pets. They are not to be released into the wild. They are only on loan to us. Understand? He waited, and there was an uproar from the crowd. Half of them were chanting, "Humphrey, Humphrey, Humphrey." The other half chanted, "Og, Og, 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 Og." Noah wasn't chanting. He was just watching the other campers, looking surprised. The noise was deafening until Mrs. Wright gave a mighty blow on her whistle. "There will be order," she exclaimed. And there was, because the skits began. The Blue Jays got the show off to a great start. AJ started this one by coming out on stage, intently looking down at the floor. Aldo came out and asked him what he was doing. "I'm trying to figure out what kind of tracks these are," AJ answered loudly, pointing at the ground. Aldo said, "They look like wolf tracks to me." Then Simon came in and asked Aldo and AJ what they were doing. When they explained, Simon said, "They look like bear tracks to me." Brad came in and asked what they were doing and said, "They look like badger tracks to me." This went on a few times with the other Blue Jays until AJ came rushing in and said, "You guys, those are train tracks." Suddenly, Richie came in, leading Miss Mac, Aldo, and Maria, and even Mrs. Wright directly toward the rest of the boys. They were hanging on each other's waists, huffing and puffing, tooting and chugging. Yes, Mrs. Wright blew her whistle like a real train while the Blue Jays ran off screaming. The skit was a hit. I laughed and cheered, and so did the others. I was so happy for the Blue Jays, I almost forgot that I would have to be out there soon. The chickadees came next. One by one, they joined Abby, who was standing with her legs deeply bent, just as they'd look as she were sitting on a real bench. But there was no bench, but they did a good job of pretending to sit on one. Once all the girls were sitting on the bench, Maria came strolling by and asked them what they were doing. "We're sitting on this invisible bench," Maria answered. "Oh," Maria said. Then she pointed to the other side of the stage. "But I moved it over there yesterday." With that, the chickadees all tumbled to the floor while the crowd laughed and clapped. I clapped too. Next up were the Bob Whites. They all appeared on stage holding balloons. Super Sam came out and directed them like an orchestra conductor. All together, they let the air out of the balloons a little at a time, and you wouldn't believe it. It sounded like the song Jingle Bells. It was such a silly sound. The crowd laughed so loud you could hardly hear the end of the song. When it was finished, they all took deep bows. I was cheering too, until Miranda came and whisked my cage off the table. A little roughly, I must say. Bye, Og. Enjoy the show, I squeaked to my friend. Miss Mac and the other robins were setting up a stand-alone door on the stage with the curtains on either side of it, while Miranda put my cage directly behind it. Okay, Humphrey, Miranda said in a calming voice, it's showtime. You know what to do. I was all alone in the middle of the stage, although no one could see me yet. The skit began as Kayla came up to the door and opened it part way. Then she slammed it shut and immediately began running around the stage screaming, help, help! Lindsay ran on stage and asked her what was wrong. There's a monster behind the door, a big, scary monster, she yelled. No way, said Lindsay. Then she opened the door, shut it again, and began running around the stage shouting, help, help! When Miranda came out and asked what was wrong, Lindsay described the monster's glowing eyes, red fangs, and ugly face. Then she asked if anybody was brave enough to take a look at it. Gail was next. She took one look, screamed, and ran away. Oh, she was a good screamer, too. The rest of the robins did the same. My ears were twitching from all that screaming, and I was feeling a little itchy and twitchy. Finally, Kayla addressed the audience. Is anyone out there brave enough to look behind the door, she asked. Miss Mac stood up. This was all arranged ahead of time. I have to admit it. I will, she said. Then she came up on stage, opened the door wide, and jumped back, screaming. At the same time, Miranda came from behind me and pushed my cage out onto the stage so everyone could see me. A monster, she screamed, running around the stage. She acted really scared. There I was on the big stage with all the campers watching. As soon as everyone saw it was me, they smiled and started laughing because they knew I was no monster. Eek, I said, though I'm not sure how well my voice carried, especially over the applause. Humphrey, 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 everyone shouted. The robins all came out on stage and took a bow. They looked so proud. Gail had the biggest smile of all. She hadn't sniffled in a long time. My heart was still pounding when Miranda put me back on the table. Thanks for saving us, Humphrey, she said. Her eyes were sparkling and her cheeks were pink. Anytime, I answered, and I meant it. When she was gone, I turned to my neighbor. How'd I do, Og? I asked. Og made an impressive dive to the bottom of the cage, then came out of the water, up on his rock, and twanged, boing, boing, boing. It was better than any applause. Then the older campers put on their skits and did some funny songs, too. It was hilarious, and it lasted way more than an hour. That night, I stayed with the Bob Whites. They were still playing crazy songs with their balloons. Once lights were out for the night, they talked a little bit in the dark about Haunted Hollow. Do you really think we'll get to see the Howler? Richie asked. It's a cinch, said Sam. I've got you covered in volleyball, canoeing, swimming, and archery. You can handle the outdoor skills, can't you, Noah? Garth asked. Noah's mind seemed to be far away. Or far, far away. Huh? Oh, sure. I know a lot of that stuff. Bob White's forever, said Garth. Bob White's forever, the other boys chimed in. I squeaked along with them, but by now, I really didn't know who to root for. The next morning, right before breakfast, Saya slipped into the rec room to visit Og and me. I'm very tired today, she told us. Last night, Abby marked up the whole cabin with twigs and rocks so we could practice reading trail marks. We even got in trouble for keeping our lights on too late, Saya sighed. That won't help our camp spirit score. My. I couldn't think of anything else to say. Here, I'd been listening to funny balloon music while Saya had to work late. I tell you, Humphrey, I like Camp Happy Hollow very much, but I'll be glad when the clash of the cabins is over so we can relax and have fun, she said. Suddenly, a deep voice spoke. What's this? An unhappy camper? It was Hap Holloway. He'd been standing at the door listening. Saya jumped when she heard him, but when she turned to look at him, he had a friendly smile on his face. I'm always looking for ways to make Camp Happy Hollow a happier place, he said. It sounds like you have some good ideas, Saya. Why don't you come to my office and we'll talk for a few minutes? Saya looked down at the floor. I was hoping for her sake that she didn't cry. "You'll be doing me a favor," Hap said in a softer voice. "Okay," Saya said, "if it will help you." Then she followed Hap out of the rec room. I watched her through the window, following him up to a cabin where he and the other counselors had an office. She glanced back at me once, and I gave her a wave of my paw. "Good luck, Saya," I said, wishing with all my heart she could hear me. Note to self: an hour of comedy is fun, 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 but laughs don't always last. And that is the end of Chapter 16. I really hope you enjoy the rest of the book. Take care, guys.